The Waveney, for me, as my local river, has always been a kind of escape route. It's a way into another world. And of course there is this secret network of ways into another world all over Britain, and they are our rivers. Lay aside your cloak, O birch tree, lay aside your white skin wrapper, for the summertime is coming, and the sun is warm in heaven, and you need no white skin wrapper. Thus aloud cried Hiawatha in the solitary forest, by the rushing Taquamenor, when the birds were singing gaily, in the moon of leaves were singing. Rivers like the Waveney, quiet places, contemplative places, hidden places, nobody knows, nobody frequents very much. It's about 66 miles long, I think, altogether, from its source on Redgrave Fen all the way down to Lowestoft, where it meets the North Sea. Redgrave, Wortham, Roydon, Diss, Skull, Billingford, Hoxton, Rockdish. I'm going to go on a voyage by canoe down the first sort of 40-odd miles of it, what's known as the Upper Waveney, down as far as Geldeston Lock. It becomes tidal below there, and it becomes part of the system of the Norfolk Broads. Very beautiful, but not as secret and as really private a place, really. Give me of your boughs, O cedar, of your strong and pliant branches, my canoe to make more steady, make more strong and firm beneath me. Well, it's a sunny afternoon in June, and I'm sitting in the canoe on Redgrave Fen at the source of the River Waveney. This is the great watershed between Norfolk and Suffolk, and the Ouse rises here as well as the Waveney. The Ouse flows out to the west and ends up at King's Lynn, and the Waveney flows east and ends up at Lowestoft and Yarmouth. Ayrsham, Bungay, Ellingham, Geldeston, Barsham, Beccles, Lowestoft, Yarmouth. One of the canoe trips that always inspired me is a literary canoe trip made by Robert Louis Stevenson and his friend Simpson in a couple of canoes through the rivers and canals of Belgium and northern France in 1876. They just took off in a couple of canoes, Stevenson in the Arethusa, an oak-built canoe, and Simpson in a sleek cedar-built canoe called the Cigarette. I call my canoe Cigarette after that because it's sleek. It may not be cedar-built, but it's a wooden canoe. It's a very beautiful craft. And I always think it's more like Simpson's Cigarette than Stevenson's Arethusa. It means that I've always got a kind of imaginary companion, which is Stevenson. I couldn't think of a better companion. Stevenson paddling alongside in a ghostly sort of way. Always something magical and numinous about the sources of rivers. And this is in fact a river fen. The name Redgrave means reed grove, something along those lines. And it's always been a place where people cut these beautiful reeds, which are what you'd use for thatching houses. The Phragmites reed. I've tied up to a post that's sticking up out of the water, and I'm looking down through this gorgeous clear water to the golden peaty river bottom. It's like being in a plane looking down at a rainforest, just a lovely little forest of waterweed. Now the sun's coming out and the ripples are casting shadows across the bottom, across the golden peaty bottom of the river. And the reeds too are sending long shadows, long pencil lines across the gold. So you get this Hockney effect, this David Hockney look, this wonderful dancing, rhythmical, ever-changing pattern. Really ribs of gold. They're exactly like the ribs you get in sand at low tide. But these are ribs, moving ribs of gold, chasing each other across the bottom. A rows of golden chorus girls dancing across the bottom. Royden, Diss, Scone, Billingford, Hoxton, Rockdish. Well, I just nosed the canoe up under Billingford Bridge. It's an old double-arched red brick bridge. I nosed the canoe up to a little weir, just a miniature weir, but rather lovely, up in these higher reaches, especially in the evening sun. And just the trail of a snail visible, a sort of viscous, winding snail trail visible on the ceiling of the bridge. There's something magical about lurking under bridges, partly the acoustic, partly the secret feeling. It's one of those secret river places. It's a great place to look for otter sprint. You often find otter sprint on the ledges either side of the bridge, just above the water, but there's none here. Now I'm going to take off downriver, head down towards Hoxton. Hoxton is the next village. Redgrave, Wortham, Royden, Diss, Scone, Billingford, Hoxton, Rockdish, Silem, Needham, Waveney. There's a bit of an overhanging willow here. Occupational hazard on the Waveney. And lovely yellow flowers of water lilies. The water lily leaves submerged. Looking a bit like washing, really. Like washing in a washing machine, if that's not too far-fetched. There's something about the water lily leaves when they get submerged. They get sort of crumpled look. A crumpled look of underwear being washed. And then suddenly a heron. A heron just taking off this enormous wings, going off at some speed. They obviously didn't expect me to suddenly appear, flying off over a herd of cattle. The great thing about being in a canoe is that your eye level is just at the same level as the field. Canoeing was easy work. To dip the paddle at the proper inclination, now right, now left, to keep the head downstream, to empty the little pool that gathered in the lap of the apron. There was not much art in that. Certain silly muscles managed it between sleep and waking, and meanwhile the brain had a whole holiday and went to sleep. We're approaching Hoxton and Hoxton Lido, a famous swimming hole. I've swum many times up this stretch of river. It's very, very deep. It's a lovely place to swim in the summer, and a great haunt of the kingfisher. When you're swimming, kingfishers dive straight over you, just in a flash. High water for me is the great canoeing poem. And it's that simple. As soon as I climb into a cigarette and get on the water and get into the rhythm of the paddling, I just hear the poem in my head. Paddles none had Hiawatha, paddles none he had or needed, for his thoughts as paddles served him, and his wishes served to guide him. Swift or slow, at will he glided, veered. Poplar plantation on the right bank, on the south bank, the Suffolk bank. Suffolk on the right, heading downstream, Suffolk on the right, Norfolk on the left. You hear their leaves tinkling in the breeze. They sound exactly like a waterfall. And across the meadow is a favourite place for puffballs, giant puffballs to grow. And sometimes there are so many of them, they look like rows of the bare bottoms of swimmers getting changed. Great big puffballs. Now this is a classic stretch of woods and water. Alders just bending over the water, mayflies skittering about. A crack willow coming up that's leaning its tresses down into the river. Just have to duck there to get underneath. Most beautiful brick bridge, low double-arched brick bridge. And if I duck right down, I can get under this. Just have to line up the canoe, duck right down, and it's the most marvellous place. It literally is just about room to get under here. It's about 3 feet 6 off the water. And then this lovely tunneled feeling as you go under. And the snails leaving their trails under the bridge. And the lovely wall toadflax, Cymbellaria muralis, growing out of the bricks. We went ashore to lunch. There were 2 eggs, a junk of bread and a bottle of wine on board the Arethusa, and 2 eggs and an Etna cooking apparatus on board the Cigarette. I'm heading back up the mill race now because I'm going to make camp. I've seen a spot up by the Lido where I'm going to make camp, and what's particularly motivating me is the thought of a cup of tea. Stevenson had a little Primus stove thing which he called an Etna stove, and he and his friend Simpson brewed up tea pretty frequently on their voyage. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my modern equivalent of an Etna stove going and brew up some tea. The master of the latter boat smashed one of the eggs in the course of disembarkation, but observing pleasantly that it might still be cooked à la papier, he dropped it into the Etna, in its covering of Flemish newspaper. I've got a head torch going, which is a help. A little billy here for brewing up the tea. A beautiful pair of swans just sailed by with 6 cygnets in tow. Round about the Indian village spread the meadows and the cornfields, and beyond them stood the forest, stood the groves of singing pine trees, green in summer, white in winter, ever sighing, ever singing. Right, well, I've got into the tent, slithered into the caddis case. It's pretty nice and cosy once you're in it. Lights out. Some strange sounds coming out of the woods. I don't think they're foxes. They might just be cattle over on the other side of the water meadows. I don't know. I do think they're dog otters. I think it could be a fox, actually. Yes, it could be a fox. A dog fox. Yes, it is. Lying here, I'm looking into a mist. There's a rolling mist coming in over the water meadow. A kind of mist that disembodies everything, disembodies the trees and sets them adrift. Just the sound of the weir in the middle distance. Everything's gone quiet now. Even the herons have gone to sleep. Well, the sun is now rising in the sky and it's drying out the dew, and I think it's time for a swim. The fish are jumping too. We've had such a cold spring, none of the rivers have really warmed up quite yet. But it's magnificent. It really is. I tend to swim the naturalist stroke, best breaststroke in rivers mostly because you just see more and you don't disturb things as much. Skull, Billingford, Hoxton, Brockdish, Silo, Leading. So here's the confluence out of the mill stream past the sluice gates at the beautiful Hoxton Mill. And the river gets narrower and deeper and passes into woods. It's woods and water all the way down here, and there are watervales. I'm already seeing watervale holes, unmistakable little watervale holes the size of tennis balls in the banks, and absolutely clouds of beautiful banded demoiselles, the black and blue damselflies, bands of black across their blue wings. And all over the banks of nettles and comfrey on the Norfolk bank. Immense stands of hemlock. Curiously enough, the damselflies, the demoiselles, seem very keen on it. Of course, it's hard not to think of Picasso's fabulous painting of Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. It is a Les Demoiselles de la Waveney. I've got to do a portage. This is the difficult bit. This is the uncomfortable part of canoeing, carrying the canoe around the weir, in this case, around the Ellingham Mill weir. So I basically just have to get the canoe out and lug it through a whole lot of undergrowth, drag it through an English jungle. Right. I'll try carrying it with the paddle in. Right. I think I'm going to have to go through this way. Just got onto a hay meadow here, which unfortunately they haven't yet cut, this particular one. Some welcoming nettles. I think Sylvia Plath wrote a rather good poem about nettles like a sort of army. That's exactly what this lot looked like. But I'm going to get the paddle out and just blaze a bit of a trail here. I'm nearly there now. My legs positively aflame with nettle stings. I suppose Hiawatha probably had leather legs. If you do enough of this, you don't even notice, I suppose. Right, last stretch now. River in sight, water's edge. In fact, I can just clamber down here and slide cigarette, I hope, straight in. There we go. Well, let's hope this is just a minor shower. Completely changes the complexion of the river, and everything's swimming now, everything's wet, including me. And there's a whole raindrop ballet going on all down the river. When Stevenson and Simpson made their inland voyage, it rained almost all the time. And they cheered themselves up now and again with a bottle of wine. I'm now being followed by a small herd of cows, inquisitive cows, or rather probably incredibly bored cows. With nothing much happens in the life of a cow. Grazing beside the river. I suppose this is a bit of a major event. And are they excited? Word's gone round, goodness me, they can hardly contain themselves. They're actually skipping with excitement. It's all right, girls. It's not that exciting. Cows in the sunset, going completely bananas, skipping and prancing with the sheer joy of our encounter. Hello, girls. Sorry, it's just me and cigarette taking a spin down the river. A pair of swans with half a dozen cygnets clustering in close to their mother. Just being a little defensive about my approach. It's fair enough. Looking after their young. It's evening and the sun's more or less dead astern, and I'm on the last stretch from Ellingham Mill down to Geldeston, heading for the Geldeston Locks Inn. It's quite a strange feeling approaching the end of a canoe voyage, because you've been in this entirely different world for quite a while, and you've been in a different dimension of time. You've gone native. And as Stevenson said, it's a form of meditation. Your self does go somewhere else, and you're just a floating being. And all the time, with the river running and the shores changing upon either hand, I kept counting my strokes and forgetting the hundreds, the happiest animal in France. Well, this is the pint I've been thinking of all the way down the river. And I'm at Geldeston. I'm at the Geldeston Locks Inn. Cigarettes pulled up on the riverside, and we've docked. And here's to cigarette. Here's to Robert Louis Stevenson and the Arethusa too. And here's to the cuckoo.
Cigarette on the Waveney was presented by Roger Deakin and produced in Bristol by Sarah Blunt.